To prevent their extinction, during 21st century, humanity will submit to the rule of artificial intelligence, embodied in an electronic eye integrated into the forehead of each individual. Although many humans will initially reject the New World Order, they will eventually resign themselves to the inevitable. And during the final chapters, it will be revealed that the plans of the Third Eye align with the events of the biblical apocalypse, which, after 2,000 years, has finally been deciphered.
Up next, you'll hear the opening pages of 2065. Let's begin. Prologue. Defining the essence of human beings has always stirred controversy among philosophers. Some argue that we are inherently bad, slaves to selfishness and vanity, and that to coexist harmoniously, we must submit to a supreme authority. On the contrary, others assert that we are born with goodness, being altruistic and empathetic, but corrupted by a heartless society that feeds on our dreams and aspirations. Personally, I believe that both perspectives complement each other. If I were to argue, I would simply say, human beings are animals by nature, chained to their instincts and impulses, but whose higher reasoning has managed to loosen those chains more than any other animal. Regarding the perception of good and evil, it is shaped by the collective consciousness, fueled by the survival mechanism of a society caught between decadence and progress. This mechanism has materialized in the form of laws, norms, and codes of conduct, which are varied depending on the dominant political, religious, and social ideologies throughout history. As individuals, all our actions, from the day we are born until the moment of our death, are performed in pursuit of personal gratification, whether to a greater or lesser degree, consciously or unconsciously, and almost always with judgment clouded by our paradigms, beliefs, traumas, and foolishness. For the individual, there is no greater gratification than their own survival, making belonging to a tribe essential. The fear of being judged and punished, whether by our community, authorities, or our gods, is what keeps us bound to the social fabric, following the path of good as much as possible, even though we may occasionally stray, some more than others, of course. Precisely fear will be crucial to continue evolving as a society, sacrificing freedom in exchange for security, suppressing our animal essence to ultimately shape the ideal utopia, a rewarding world, free of flaws, but paradoxically one that no one will be able to appreciate. 2050. December 25th emergency meeting convened by the United Nations due to global financial collapse. Transcription of the speech presented by Yilan Shekhar, the wealthiest person in the history of humanity. Communism died with the Soviet Union. Capitalism due to the climate collapse. Their decomposing corpses satisfy the elite's appetite, while the people must settle for the leftovers. And soon, when there are no bones left to gnaw, we will end up devouring each other. Whether facing an incurable pandemic or fighting in nuclear wars for control of resources, we will eventually return to obscurantism, from which we will never manage to escape. I do not know if we still have time to avoid the catastrophe, but there is a way to find out, overthrowing the current system and establishing a new one. And you may wonder, why would someone like me, so privileged by capitalism, be willing to sacrifice everything to help humanity? For a simple reason: love. I made the mistake of having children and loving them too much, and it would pain me to see them join warring clans fighting over water deposits. Now, if capitalism, socialism, communism, and many other socio-economic systems failed, it was because they all had a common flaw. They were managed by human beings. Unfortunately, the vast majority of humans are egocentric. If you disagree with my statement, ladies and gentlemen, I propose an experiment. Stick your hand in an industrial blender, turn it on, and see how magically you stop caring about the massive looting that has been occurring in India for the past 2 weeks, resulting in more than 13,000 murders. Of course, I don't deny that among us there might be a martyr willing to rip out their entrails to feed their offspring. In any case, I suggest they start a religion, and this time, please, with no profit motive. Now, choosing someone wise, incorruptible, and impartial to come and impose order would be less likely than finding a grain of sugar in the Sahara Desert. So instead of wasting our scarce resources, time, and energy trying to summon the Messiah, why not just create it? Or rather, program it. Here is the key to establishing the next global socio-economic system: artificial intelligence. Ladies and gentlemen, if you truly urge a real transformation, I suggest you elevate your level of consciousness, challenge your paradigms, and when you manage to awaken your third eye, you will be able to see the solution. You will have achieved enlightenment. 2051. It is not the just, but the cunning who dispense justice. Today marks the end of my sentence. Almost 26 years confined in this cell, all for a crime I never committed. Damn coincidence. It was early morning. Ava woke me up crying with happiness. She was finally pregnant. Overcome with emotion, our hearts melted into an embrace. But suddenly, an armed squad burst into the room. They had made a mistake and raided the wrong apartment. Meanwhile, our neighbors, drug traffickers disguised as missionaries, took advantage of the confusion to escape. Sons of bitches. They fled with their sins while we were stoned. Panic-stricken, my wife jumped behind the bed, which a police officer misinterpreted, and he didn't hesitate to shoot her. No! That bullet pierced her belly. It killed our baby. Rolling in a pool of her own blood, Ava cried out for help. Her screams tore my soul apart. I tried to throw myself at her feet, but the police brutally shoved me away and knocked me out with blows. I woke up hours later in a cell at the precinct. They didn't even give me a call or a miserable glass of water, and yet nothing angered me more than not being able to be with my beloved while her life faded in the operating room. That early morning, I lost everything. The love of my life and my longed-for son, whose souls, though free of sin, will suffer eternally just as I agonize in this earthly hell. Come to think of it, even freedom wouldn't serve as consolation. How did I end up in prison? Well, the cops who arrested me washed their hands clean by inventing an alibi. They claimed it was I who shot my wife, accusing me of femicide. Immediately, a witch hunt began. Without hearing my side of the story, several collectives led by opportunistic politicians demanded my head. Only idiots condemn before the trial. Finally, I stood in court, facing corrupt police officers, false witnesses, a bought jury, and a biased judge. The perfect ingredients to convict an innocent. They presented a series of fraudulent evidence against me, each more outrageous than the last. The system is as corrupt as its people. The day of the verdict arrived. Guilty, pronounced the jury unanimously, and the judge sentenced Adam Smith, I sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of bail. Justice has been served! The sheep clamored in unison. So much was the media pressure that the authorities decided to transfer me to a maximum security prison, reducing me to the level of serial killers and mafia bosses. 50 years are crushing. They wither the spirit. Imagine waking up every day in the same cell, surrounded by the same faces, resigned to tasteless food and tormented by your inner demons. Although, looking at it that way, it doesn't sound so different from living in freedom. I was locked up in mid-2025 during the Pentagon's UFO disappointment, and since then, I've tried to keep myself informed about the news from the outside world, almost always discouraging. Wars and rumors of wars, farces, inflation, pollution, unemployment, pandemics, migration. In my opinion, the media only exaggerates to sell. Catastrophes have always existed, haven't they? And yet, the world hasn't stopped turning for a single day. Sure, you get scared when World War III seems about to break out, when smallpox resurfaces to exterminate humanity, or even when hackers tear apart the world economy. Yet, no matter how grave the adversity, society always manages to return to normal. I, on the other hand, was losing hope of ever regaining my freedom until one morning in late 2050, I received my first visit in years. Esther Salomon was a young, unemployed lawyer. Since no one hired her, she lacked experience. And since she lacked experience, no one would hire her. The paradox of the labor market. Litigating was her only alternative. But even to attract clients, she needed to build a solid reputation. Luckily, one day, she had the brilliant idea of putting herself in the eye of the hurricane. The plan was simple: revive high-profile cases with controversial verdicts. She began digging through the prison archive. 7 inmates rejected her services, considering her incompetent. I was her 8th option. I almost rejected her too, not because of her outdated clothing, her scent of frustration, or her nervous gaze. I would reject her simply because decades in misery had convinced me of my guilt. I was guilty of not having been able to defend my family when they needed me most. I was thanking Esther for her kind offer, but she interrupted me with something that pierced my heart. Adan, a week ago, I visited Ava's grave. What do you mean? I asked her, gripped by melancholy. I took photographs, she explained with complete respect. Do you want to see them? With a dry throat, I stammered. No, I don't know. Still, she pulled out 3 photographs of a gravestone from her folder. She handed them to me, and as I looked at them, my blood pressure dropped. It looks very neglected. I'd say abandoned, but her mother. Her mother died 3 years ago. Didn't you know? Of course I didn't know. Both families, Eva's and mine, had severed all communication with me after the trial. Esther seemed to sense it and, laughing nervously, hurried to add, ironically, eternity in a cemetery doesn't last forever. Understanding, I asked, her grave, are they going to... In 2 years, they will throw her remains into a mass grave. A fiery indignation reddened my face. I was about to exclaim, "That's outrageous! I won't allow her to be treated like an animal." But a knot of impotence obstructed my throat. Esther leaned toward me to comment. According to my research, Ava has no surviving relatives. Dan, are you going to allow her grave to be desecrated? Will you let all trace of her existence be erased from the face of the earth? When logic fails, you must appeal to emotion. I had to regain my freedom, not for myself, but for Ava. I would be the one to protect her final resting place with claws and teeth. I accepted Esther's proposal, and we immediately got to work. Rearranging the case, my new lawyer demonstrated an unusual cunning and quickly found inconsistencies in the evidence. As we investigated, we received wonderful news. 8 years ago, my drug trafficking neighbors had been captured in Colombia, and one of them, ironically turned evangelist, claimed to be repentant of his sins and seemed willing to testify on my behalf. Moreover, several police officers involved that night were now convicted criminals. And thanks to the corrupt judge who sentenced me having committed suicide by shooting himself 13 times in the back, we had a clear path to rush towards freedom. Every day, we gathered more evidence in our favor, but when we presented it to the authorities requesting to reopen the case without giving us explanations, they simply shelved it. Let's reflect for a minute. For decades, the country has been governed by the left, then the right, then back to the left, and finally to the right again, and no revolutionary has managed to eradicate corruption. Perhaps we're wasting our time choosing our leaders, seduced by their ideals, when for them, power is the supreme ideal. As long as the corrupt remain in power, we will continue to wallow in our own shit, and we will only rise to the surface when we find someone capable of dictating the rules without being influenced by their own interests. In other words, we'll never get out. It would take God himself to come down and govern us, and I'm not referring to the God of any religion, since even invented deities act out of convenience. Esther and I tried by all means to be heard, but having made no progress, with a heavy heart, I decided to confine myself to my cell and not come out for any reason until today, early in the morning, when the guards came to get me. Dan Smith, get ready, a firm-voiced officer requested as he inserted his key into the lock of my cell. Sleepy, I complained in a hoarse voice. Let me sleep. I don't want to see anyone. We have orders to take you to the director. What? What the hell are you talking about? Intrigued, I began to wake up. It's a confidential matter. Come on, get up. Confidential? Reopening my case was the only matter that mattered to me. Had my prayers been heard? Get up! The guard was starting to lose patience. Okay, I'm coming. I rubbed my eyes and immediately placed my feet on the floor. After 10 minutes, I found myself sitting in the prison director's office, guarded by 2 burly guards. I began to wonder why the director required my presence in the middle of the night, and why the hell she wasn't present, when suddenly the aforementioned lady opened her office door and stormed in like a whirlwind. She was obese, 40 years old. The skirt and jacket constrained her, and although her harsh eyes seemed witnesses to countless neglects, they reflected no remorse. She wore a metal bracelet on her wrist, projecting the hologram of an emaciated old man lying on a couch, who, through a video call, commented, "Lilith, I don't care about your accusations. Maybe that idiot is right, but I have charisma. You can present thousands of pieces of evidence against me, and still the senators will protect me tooth and nail." Director Lilith passed by me, completely ignoring me, and as soon as she sat at a desk, she told her interlocutor, "Azael, I have to go. Another prospect has just arrived to join the project." Azael inquired, intrigued. "The one from Yelin Shekhar? Lilith, tell me what it's about. I can't stand so much secrecy." "Bureaucracy, Azael. I'm not allowed to reveal details yet, but I assure you that you'll hear about it soon." And without allowing the old man to say goodbye, she hung up the call, dissolving the hologram. I was filled with intrigue upon hearing the name Yelin Shekhar, precisely the richest person in history, who built his trillion-dollar fortune in the technology sector through his environmental company, Gaia. The director began to browse through the folders on her holographic computer, opened a file, and started reading. "Aden, right? Aden Smith?" Taken by surprise, I croaked, Yes, ma'am. I think that ma'am sounded too flattering." Still without turning to look at me, she continued, "Sentenced to life imprisonment. 50 years, of which you've already served 26. Nervously, I nodded. "Ma'am, if you've had the chance to review my file, I assure you that—" "Silence," she ordered me with a dismissive gesture. "I don't analyze files. My lawyers take care of that." What the hell is she reading then? I thought, and just as I was about to ask, "What do your lawyers tell you?" she seemed to read my mind and continued, "They told me something interesting." What thing?" In case of a retrial, you would have all the chances to win. I was about to crack a victorious smile, but I restrained myself, waiting for her verdict. Letting out a fake sigh, she added, "Oh, Mr. Smith, if only justice were impartial." For the first time, she turned to look at me, examining me from head to toe with disdainful eyes. "I'll be honest, no one important benefits if you regain your freedom." "What? What does that mean?" I asked, struck by a sudden fever. "That due to the recent global financial collapse, the country's economy is on the floor, and we don't have the budget to reopen trials as complex as yours." But it's my right." I was about to raise my voice, but I had the sense to restrain myself. "Yes, I know." She downplayed something as essential as human rights, returning her gaze to her holographic screen. "Besides, if we were to fail in your favor, we would have to acknowledge..." Enraged by indignation, I helped her finish her excuse. "What? That you are corrupt?" "Oh no, I screwed up. God can't save me from this one." Sideways, she looked at me with scorn, and to my amazement, she smirked mockingly. "We would have to admit our mistake," she corrected, giving me one last chance to shut up. But I missed it, and leaning towards her, I pleaded, "Ma'am, you yourself admit that I don't deserve to be here." "Indignant," she replied, "and I don't deserve to serve in this cesspool. I should be in the Senate, but that's life. Unfair to everyone, don't you think, Adam Smith?" Apparently, she wouldn't address me formally anymore. Son of a bitch! She was mocking me. My blood boiled in moments. Full of frustration, I was about to get up and land a punch on her jaw, but unsuspecting of my intentions, she added timely, "Fortunately, from time to time, opportunities present themselves that it would be a crime to miss." Opportunities? What are you referring to? Letting my guard down, I loosened my fists. With a cold look, she explained to me, "Adam, I'm referring to the only chance you'll have to see the sunlight again. And if you squander it, I guarantee you'll regret it for the next 24 years. I was about to demand that she get to the point, but she seemed accustomed to cutting the suspense with more suspense. "Adam Smith, what would you be willing to do to regain your freedom?" I immediately inferred that she intended to bribe me, but to respond, I tried to twist the words, attempting not to sound too foolish. "Are you talking about paying a bail?" She smiled arrogantly again, but soon her face regained bitterness. "What are you talking about? Major crimes like first-degree murder don't qualify for bail." "Yes, I know, but it didn't occur to me." "Enough!" she interrupted with a wave of her hand. "According to your financial statements, you don't have enough savings to bribe even the lowliest of my officers, and you still think it will be enough to buy me?" She laughed indignantly. "I had to lie? No, at no point." "Just be silent and pay attention," she ordered venomously. Intimidated, I swallowed and straightened in my seat. "Adam, if I guarantee that as soon as it dawns, you can walk out the front door, what would you be willing to give in return?" "Are you talking about in a few hours?" That possibility left me dumbfounded. She nodded, and by the way she clenched her jaw, she seemed to be losing patience. Astounded, I continued, I don't know. It sounds so unreal. Your Honor, are you serious?" Tired of beating around the bush, she began rummaging through the drawers of her desk until she pulled out a thick contract, which she placed on the table in front of me. "Even though you live confined in the maximum security sector, you've probably heard of Yalan Shekhar." "Of course," I nodded. "The richest person in history who made his fortune with ecology. Well, among his many projects, there is one destined to change the course of humanity." That sounded incredible. "Really? To that extent?" I asked incredulously. The director smiled confidently. "He named that project the Third Eye," she pronounced with emphasis. And without giving me a chance to ask questions, she continued, "I would like to reveal all the details about it, but as I already mentioned to Senator Azael in a video call, they are confidential. The only thing I can tell you is, we are looking for volunteers." "Volunteers of what kind?" I asked. "Convicts, criminals willing to prove they can reform and reintegrate into society." "Director, do you want me to?" "The deal I propose is simple. You promise to keep quiet about your case, offer yourself as a volunteer for the Third Eye, and I will grant you immediate freedom." She emphasized each syllable, tapping her index finger on the oak desk. Intrigued, I asked, "And by offering myself as a volunteer, what am I giving up?" With a subtle voice, she explained, "Your privacy, your complete privacy." "What do you mean?" That confused me. In this prison, no one has privacy. The Third Eye goes beyond just installing cameras in cells or collecting personal information through the cell phone. If we want to supervise a person to the fullest, we must use all scientific ingenuity so we can predict and understand each of their behaviors. "Wow!" I exclaimed quietly. "That sounds like total surveillance." "The idea, Adam, is that at dawn, you walk out the front door, rebuild your life in society as a free man, and after a while, Third Eye agents will come to visit you and simply subject you to a procedure to keep you monitored. That's all." "Is that all?" Obviously, she intended to turn me into a guinea pig. Although thinking about it, Giving up my privacy in exchange for 24 years of probation didn't sound terrible. Besides, people usually give technology their personal data, their preferences, their schedules, and sometimes their darkest secrets, turning privacy into a mere illusion. And collecting that information, governments and corporations distort it to shape the psyche of the masses, persuading them to vote for a certain politician, adhere to a certain ideology, or consume a certain product. And without realizing it, all the sheep line up for the slaughter. I was about to accept the deal, but it sounded so convenient that intuition stopped me. And after a moment of reflection, I uttered, "I would like to consult with my lawyer." I leaned over to take a look at the contract, but as soon as I touched the cover with the tips of my fingers, the director grabbed my wrist with her left hand, squeezing it firmly. Terrified, I tried to pull my hand away, but she didn't let go. And with malice, she muttered, "I must interview other prospects. Don't make me waste time." A shiver ran down my spine. The matter was murkier than I imagined. The director brought a pen to my right hand, forcing me to take it. "Adam, we'll do the following. When I count to 3, your opportunity will have expired." "But my lawyer," I insisted nervously. "I already told you. There's no time for lawyers." "What if you just grant me one call?" "1," she pronounced. "It'll only be a minute." "2." I wanted to beg for mercy, but panic choked my throat. And then she pronounced, "3. Take him away." She released my wrist, and instantly the 2 guards grabbed my forearms, lifting me off the chair with ease to drag me toward the exit. I tried to resist, but between them, they tripled my strength. I had just thrown away the opportunity of a lifetime. But just before crossing the threshold of the door, panic screamed for me. "Wait, wait, I'll sign, I'll sign." With a subtle gesture of her chubby left hand, Lilith made the guard stop. She gestured to my right hand, and when I looked, I noticed that I still held the pen firmly. I signed. I had made a deal with the devil. I still didn't understand the conditions of the contract, and yet my freedom was worth the price to pay. As soon as the agreement was closed, they returned me to my cell. I tried to get some sleep, but intrigue and suspense wouldn't let me sleep. I spent 26 years behind bars, all for a crime I never committed, and yet I am fortunate. Today, my sentence ends. Soon, I will taste the fresh breeze again and immerse myself in the warm sunrise. I hope you enjoyed the beginning of 2065. The full novel is available on Amazon. You can find it by searching Astaroth. But if you'd prefer to read a few more chapters before deciding to purchase it, comment me and I'll get in touch with you.